There are things worse than death in war. I learned that in October 1917, when I spent 6 days buried alive in a collapsed dugout at Passchendaele. 6 days in total darkness with 3 dead men. 6 days breathing air that was killing me. 6 days waiting to die. 6 days that somehow I survived. They called it a miracle when they dug me out. Said God had spared me. Said I was the luckiest man alive. But luck doesn't feel like spending 6 days in a tomb. Divine intervention doesn't taste like mud and death. Miracles don't haunt you for over a century. My name is Edward Ashford, Eddie to anyone who knew me before the war. Before Passchendaele, before I learned what it means to be buried alive with the fallen. I was 23 years old, a corporal in the British Army, Manchester Regiment. We'd been fighting in the Third Battle of Ypres for months, what they'd later call Passchendaele, the muddiest, bloodiest, most God-forsaken battlefield of the entire war. I went into that dugout with 3 other men, Private Wilson, Private Hayes, Corporal Bennett. Good men, brothers. We went in together expecting to wait out the shelling and come back out when it was over. Instead, the walls collapsed, the entrance was buried, and we were trapped 20 feet underground with no way out and no one knowing we were alive. Wilson died on day 2, Hayes on day 3, Bennett on day 4. Then it was just me, alone in the darkness with 3 corpses for 2 more days. This is the story of those 6 days, of what it means to be buried alive, of watching men die slowly, of losing your mind in darkness, and of somehow, impossibly, surviving when you shouldn't have, when you didn't want to, when death would have been mercy. Let me take you back before the burial, before Passchendaele, before everything went to hell. Manchester, England, 1914. I was 20 years old, working in a textile mill like my father before me. 12-hour days, 6 days a week, breathing cotton dust that would probably end me by 50 if I kept at it. It was a hard life, but it was life. It was normal. Then the war started. August 1914. Germany invaded Belgium. Britain declared war, and suddenly every young man in the country was expected to enlist, to do his duty, to serve king and country. The propaganda was everywhere. Posters showing soldiers as heroes, promising adventure, glory, a chance to be part of something greater than factory work. Lord Kitchener pointing at you. Your country needs you. I believed it. God help me, I believed it all. Walked into the recruitment office in September 1914, signed my name, took the king's shilling, became a soldier. My mother cried, begged me not to go, said she had a bad feeling, that this war would be different, worse, that I shouldn't trust the promises. But I was 20, invincible, certain I'd be home by Christmas like everyone said, certain this would be a grand adventure, certain I'd see France, fight bravely, and return a hero. I was a fool. Basic training was at a camp in Yorkshire. 3 months learning to march, shoot, follow orders. They taught us how to use a rifle, how to dig trenches, how to charge with bayonets, how to be soldiers. But they didn't teach us what war really was, didn't prepare us for the reality, didn't explain that everything they were telling us was a lie, that there would be no glory, no heroism, no grand adventure, just mud and blood and death. We shipped to France in January 1915, landed at Le Havre, marched to the front, the Western Front, a line of trenches stretching from the English Channel to Switzerland, 400 miles of hell. I got my first glimpse of the trenches in February 1915, saw the mud, the rats, the bodies, the men who'd been there for months, eyes hollow, faces gray, looking more like ghosts than soldiers. That's when I understood. This wasn't going to be over by Christmas. This wasn't an adventure. This was survival. And most of us weren't going to make it. I served on the Western Front for 2.5 years before Passchendaele. Saw action at the Somme in 1916. Lost half my company in one day. Saw things that changed me, broke me, made me into something that wasn't quite human anymore. By 1917, I was a corporal, not because I was brave or skilled, just because I'd survived longer than most. Because the men who'd been corporals before me were dead. Because survival meant promotion in a war that consumed officers faster than they could be replaced. The Third Battle of Ypres started in July 1917. The goal was to break through German lines, capture the ridge at Passchendaele, end the stalemate, win the war. Instead, it became a nightmare, the worst battlefield of the entire war. The rain started in August and never stopped. 3 months of constant rain. The ground couldn't absorb it. The shell craters filled with water. The trenches turned to rivers of mud. Men drowned in shell holes, got stuck in mud and couldn't get out, sank slowly while their friends watched helplessly. The mud at Passchendaele was different from other battlefields, deeper, thicker, like quicksand. It would swallow men whole, swallow horses, swallow artillery pieces. Everything disappeared into that mud. And the smell. God, the smell. Decomposition, gas, cordite, human waste, death. All of it mixed together into a stench so thick you could taste it. So overwhelming it became normal. You stopped noticing, stopped caring, just breathed it and tried not to think about what you were breathing. My company was assigned to hold a section of trench near the village of Passchendaele in October 1917. We'd been there for 2 weeks. Constant shelling, constant rain, constant misery. The trench walls were collapsing. We'd shore them up with timber and sandbags, but the mud was too heavy, too saturated. Nothing held. Men were starting to talk about it, about how the trenches weren't safe, about how one good hit from German artillery could bring the whole thing down, bury everyone inside. But we had orders. Hold this position. No retreat, no withdrawal, just hold. So we held, even though everyone knew the walls were going to collapse eventually. Even though we knew staying was suicide. We held because that's what soldiers do. We follow orders, even when the orders are going to get us killed.
October 26, 1917, 0400 hours. I was in a dugout with 3 other men. A dugout was a small underground shelter dug into the trench wall, maybe 8 feet by 6 feet. Low ceiling, reinforced with timber. It was where you'd go during shelling, where you'd try to sleep, where you'd hide from the rain. It wasn't safe, not really, but it was safer than being above ground when shells were falling. Private Wilson was 19, from London. Had lied about his age to enlist. Still looked like a child despite 2 years in the trenches. Private Hayes was 21, from Wales. Quiet, rarely spoke, just did his duty and tried to survive. Corporal Bennett was 25, my age, from Liverpool. We'd served together since 1915, had kept each other alive through the Somme, through a dozen smaller battles. We were brothers. The 4 of us were in the dugout because the Germans had started shelling at 0300 hours. Heavy artillery, big shells, the kind that could collapse trenches, the kind that made the earth shake. We'd retreated to the dugout to wait it out. Standard procedure. Let the shells fall. Hope your position doesn't take a direct hit. Come back out when it's over. We were sitting in the darkness, listening to the shells, feeling the ground shake with each impact, waiting. "This is a bad one," Bennett said, his voice calm, professional. He'd been through worse. "They're hitting us harder than usual," Hayes agreed. "Think they're planning an attack?" Wilson asked, voice shaken. He was scared. We all were. But he showed it more than the rest of us. "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe they just want to make us miserable. Either way, we stay here until it's over. Stay low, stay quiet. We'll be fine." I believed it when I said it. We'd survived worse shellings, survived direct hits on positions next to us, survived things that should have ended us. We'd survive this too. Then the world exploded. The loudest sound I've ever heard. A German shell. Maybe a 5.9, maybe bigger. Direct hit on the trench section right above our dugout. The timber beams cracked. The ceiling sagged. Dirt started falling. "Out! Everyone out!" I shouted. But there was nowhere to go. The entrance to the dugout was already collapsing. Tons of mud and debris pouring in. Wilson tried to run. Got halfway to the entrance. Then the ceiling came down. Everything came down. Timber, sandbags, mud, all of it, burying us. I was thrown backward, hit the rear wall, felt the impact in my spine. Everything went dark. Dust and dirt in my eyes, my mouth, my lungs. Couldn't see, couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Just buried, pressed down by weight, by darkness, by the earth itself. I don't know how long I was unconscious. Could have been seconds, could have been minutes. When I came to, everything was wrong. I couldn't see anything. Complete darkness. No light at all. I tried to move, could barely shift my arms. Something heavy was on my legs, pinning me. I could hear breathing. Panicked breathing. Someone else was alive. "Wilson," I called out. Voice hoarse. Throat full of dust. "Hayes? Bennett?" "Here." Bennett's voice, close, to my left. "I'm here." "Wilson!" That was Hayes. Sounded further away. to my right. I can't move. Something's on me. Wilson! I called again. No response. Wilson! I don't think he made it, then it said quietly. He was at the entrance when it came down. The entrance. I turned my head, tried to see where the entrance had been. Saw nothing. Just darkness. Complete darkness. The entrance was gone. Buried. Sealed. We were trapped.
The first hour was panic. All of us trying to dig, trying to move debris, trying to find a way out. But we couldn't see, couldn't coordinate, and there was too much weight, too much mud. Every time we moved something, more would shift down. We were buried under tons of earth and timber, 20 feet down, maybe more. No one above knew we were alive. No one was coming to dig us out. We need to conserve energy, Bennett finally said, his voice steady, leadership. Stop digging. We're not getting out that way. We need to wait. They'll dig us out. When? Hayes asked. How will they even know we're here? They'll know, Bennett said, but I could hear the doubt in his voice. Could hear him trying to convince himself as much as us. They'll see the dugout collapsed. They'll dig. We just need to wait. Wilson? Hayes asked quietly. Should we check on Wilson? I felt around in the darkness, found what felt like timber, moved it, felt underneath, found fabric, a uniform, a body. No movement, no breathing. He's gone, I said. Must have been instant when the ceiling came down. 3 of us, 1 dead, trapped in a collapsed dugout with no way out. We settled in to wait. What else could we do? We couldn't dig, couldn't see, couldn't do anything but sit in the darkness and wait for rescue that might never come. How long do you think we have? Before what? Bennett replied. Before the air runs out, Hayes said. We're underground, sealed in. Eventually we'll suffocate, won't we? The silence that followed was deafening. Because he was right. We were in a sealed space. Air was finite. We'd breathe the oxygen, exhale carbon dioxide, and eventually the balance would shift. The air would become unbreathable. We'd suffocate. Days, Bennett finally said. We have days. They'll dig us out before then. Just stay calm, breathe slowly, conserve oxygen. But none of us believed him. None of us thought rescue was coming. None of us thought we'd survive this. We were buried alive, and buried alive meant death. Just a question of how long it would take. Day 1 was hope. We convinced ourselves that rescue was coming, that someone above knew we were down here, that they were digging, that we'd hear voices soon, that we just needed to wait a little longer. We had no food. The dugout had been a temporary shelter. We hadn't stocked it with rations. We had no water, no candles after the first few hours when Bennett's last stub burned out. Just darkness, complete, absolute. The kind of darkness that presses on you, that makes you feel like you're disappearing. We talked to pass the time, shared stories, talked about home, about what we'd do after the war. Hayes talked about his father's farm in Wales, how he'd go back, work the land, never leave again. Bennett talked about Liverpool, about the docks, about ships coming in from around the world, about how he wanted to sail, see places that weren't trenches. I talked about Manchester, about the textile mills, about how I'd never go back to factory work, how I'd find something else, something better, something that didn't feel like slow death. We were lying to ourselves, making plans we knew we'd never fulfill. But it helped. It kept the panic away, kept us from thinking about the reality of our situation, kept us human a little longer. Wilson's body was in the corner. We couldn't see it in the darkness, but we knew it was there, could smell it starting to decay, could feel its presence, a reminder of what was coming for us. "Should we move him?" Hayes asked once. "Move him where?" Bennett replied. "We're in an 8-foot space. There's nowhere to move him. Just try not to think about it." But how do you not think about it? How do you ignore a corpse 3 feet away? How do you pretend everything's normal when you're buried alive with a dead man? You can't. You just try to survive another hour, another minute, another breath. Day 2 started with Wilson's death becoming undeniable. The smell intensified. Sweet, sickly, rot. We couldn't escape it, couldn't breathe without tasting it. "I can't do this," Hayes said, his voice higher, panicked. "I can't breathe. The air's going bad. I can feel it. We're suffocating." "Calm down," Bennett ordered. "You're hyperventilating. That's making it worse. Breathe slow. Breathe easy." "I can't. There's no air. We're dying." "Hayes," I shouted, grabbed him in the darkness, shook him. "Listen to me. You're panicking. That's using more oxygen. You need to calm down. Slow breaths. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Slow." He tried to control his breathing, but I could feel him shaking, could feel the terror. He was right to be terrified. We all were. The air was getting worse, stale, heavy. Each breath felt less satisfying, like we weren't getting enough oxygen, like we were drowning on dry land. "How long has it been since the collapse?" asked Hayes. "About 30 hours, Bennett said. "How do you know? There's no light, no way to tell time." "I'm counting, in my head, keeping track. It's been about 30 hours. 30 hours. Felt like 30 days. Time moved differently in darkness, stretched, warped. Each minute felt like an hour, each hour like a day. We tried to sleep, needed to conserve energy, conserve oxygen. But sleep was difficult. The darkness was too complete, the smell too strong, the fear too intense. And when you did sleep, you woke up confused, disoriented, forgetting where you were, then remembering, and the remembering was worse than the not sleeping. Around what Bennett estimated was mid-afternoon on day 2, Hayes started making sounds. Not words, just sounds, gasping, wheezing. "Hayes," I called. "You okay?" No response, just more gasping. I felt for him in the darkness, found him. He was convulsing, body jerking, hands clutching at his throat. "He's suffocating," I said. "Bennett, help me." We tried to help, tried to position him better, tried to give him what little air there was, but there was nothing we could do. The oxygen was too low, the carbon dioxide too high. His body was shutting down. He died after about 20 minutes of struggle, gasping, fighting for air that wasn't there, finally going still, quiet, gone. "Fuck," Bennett said. Just that one word, summing up everything. 2 dead now. 2 of us left, and the air getting worse by the hour. Day 3 was when I started to lose my mind. The darkness was doing things to me, making me see things that weren't there, lights that didn't exist, shapes moving in the black, faces. I knew it was my brain trying to compensate for sensory deprivation. Knew it wasn't real, but knowing didn't make it stop, didn't make it less terrifying. Do you see them, Bennett? See what? The lights, the faces, moving in the darkness. Silence. Then, no, I don't see anything. There's nothing there, Eddie. Your mind is playing tricks. Happens when you're in darkness this long. Just ignore it. But I couldn't ignore it. The hallucinations were becoming more frequent, more vivid, more real. I'd see Wilson standing in the corner, see Hayes sitting up, see my mother, my father who died when I was young, see people I knew were dead or far away, and they talk to me, whisper things, tell me to give up, tell me to stop fighting, tell me death was easier than this. Eddie, Bennett's voice cutting through the hallucinations. Talk to me, stay with me. Don't go into your head, that's how you lose it. I can't breathe, Bennett. The air's too bad. We're dying. We're not dead yet, he said. As long as we're breathing, we're alive. As long as we're alive, there's hope. Hope of what? No one's coming. No one knows we're here. Even if they did, there's 20 feet of mud above us. They can't dig through that. We're gonna die here, in the dark, with corpses. Maybe, Bennett admitted. But maybe not. Maybe someone's digging right now. Maybe we're hours from rescue. We don't know. So we keep breathing, keep waiting, keep surviving. Because giving up means definitely dying. Fighting means maybe living. I wanted to believe him, wanted to think rescue was possible. But I'd stopped believing in rescue, stopped believing in anything, except the darkness and the smell and the certainty of death. We hadn't had water in 3 days. My tongue was swollen, my throat was cracked, my lips were bleeding. Thirst was worse than hunger, worse than the bad air, worse than everything. I'd have given anything for water, would have traded years of my life for one sip, would have done things I can't admit to for water. There's mud on the walls, wet mud. Can we drink it? That's not water, Bennett said. That's contaminated, full of chemicals, bodies. It'll make you sick. We're already dying. What difference does it make? The difference between dying in 6 days and dying in 6 hours, Bennett said. Don't drink the mud. But I was so thirsty, so desperate. When Bennett fell asleep or passed out, hard to tell the difference. I felt along the wall, found wet mud, brought it to my mouth. It tasted like death, like rot, like everything wrong. But it was wet. It soothed my throat for a moment. I swallowed it, then vomited it back up. Bennett was right. The mud was toxic. It was going to end me faster. But at least the vomiting gave me some moisture, some relief, even if it was horrible.
Day 4 started with Bennett becoming quieter, weaker. The lack of oxygen was affecting him worse than me. Or maybe he was just giving up. Hard to tell. Bennett, I said, talk to me. Stay awake. Tired, he mumbled. So tired. Just let me sleep. No, you sleep. You might not wake up. Stay with me. Keep talking. About what? Anything. Liverpool, the docks, your plans, anything. He tried to talk, but the words came slower, softer. He was fading. "Eddie," he said, after a long silence, "if you make it out, if somehow you survive and I don't, tell my mum I wasn't scared. Tell her I thought about her. Tell her..." He didn't finish, just went quiet. "Bennett?" Nothing. "Bennett!" I felt for him, found him, checked for breathing. It was there, barely, shallow, weak, but there. He'd passed out or fallen into a coma, or was dying. I didn't know which. I sat next to him, held his hand in the darkness, talked to him even though he couldn't hear. Told him about Manchester, about before the war, about normal things, human things, anything to fill the silence. He died sometime that afternoon. I don't know exactly when. He just stopped breathing. One moment there was a faint rise and fall of his chest. The next there wasn't. "No," I said. "No, no, no. Bennett, don't. Don't leave me alone. Please." But he was gone. 3 dead, 1 alive. Me, alone in the darkness with 3 corpses. Alone with bad air and no water and no hope. Alone waiting to die. That's when I started screaming. Couldn't help it. The isolation, the fear, the certainty, it all came out. I screamed until my throat bled. Screamed until I had no voice. Screamed until I passed out from lack of oxygen. When I woke up, if it was waking up and not just a different level of consciousness, I was coma, numb, past fear, past hope, past everything. I was just existing, breathing, waiting. Nothing more.
Days 5 and 6 blurred together. I'm not sure where one ended and the other began. Time stopped meaning anything. I'd drift in and out of consciousness. Sometimes I'd think I was home, in Manchester, in my bed. Then I'd wake up in darkness and remember. Sometimes I'd think I was dead, that this was hell, eternal darkness, eternal isolation, punishment for sins I didn't remember committing. Sometimes I'd have conversations with Wilson, with Hayes, with Bennett. They'd answer. We'd talk like we used to, like they weren't corpses rotting 3 feet away. My mind was gone, completely gone, broken by darkness and isolation and oxygen deprivation. I'd lost the ability to tell what was real and what wasn't, lost the ability to care. The thirst was unbearable, worse than anything. I'd stopped trying to resist, drank more mud, vomited, drank more. My body was shutting down. I could feel it, organs failing, systems stopping, death coming. I welcomed it, prayed for it, begged for it. Please, I'd whisper into the darkness. Please let me die. Please end this. I can't do this anymore. I can't. But death was taking its time, was making me suffer every moment, was making me earn it. I'd given up on rescue, given up on survival, given up on everything except waiting for the end. And then I heard something, a sound, distant, muffled, but there, a scraping sound, metal on dirt. No, I said, not real, hallucination, not real. But the sound continued, got louder, closer. Voices, muffled, indistinct, but voices, human voices. Here, I tried to scream, but my voice was gone, destroyed from screaming, from dehydration, from breathing bad air for 6 days. Only a whisper came out. "Here, I'm here. Please, I'm here." The scraping got louder, closer. Light appeared. Actual light, not hallucination light. Real light, filtering through cracks in the debris, getting brighter. "There's someone alive in there." A voice, English accent, British, real. "Dig faster, carefully, the whole thing could come down." More scraping, more light, more voices, then hands reaching through, grabbing me, pulling me out, into light so bright it hurt, into air so fresh it burned, into life when I'd been certain I was dead. They pulled me out of that collapsed dugout on November 1st, 1917. 6 days after the collapse. 6 days buried alive. They said it was a miracle. Said they'd only been digging because they needed to reclaim that section of trench. Hadn't expected to find anyone alive. Said 6 days without food or water and minimal oxygen should have ended me. Should have ended me days ago. But somehow I'd survived. Somehow I'd lasted when 3 others hadn't. The medics couldn't understand it, couldn't explain it. Put it down to luck, divine intervention, miracle. But it didn't feel like a miracle. It felt like a curse. Because I'd survived when Wilson, Hayes, and Bennett hadn't. Because I'd lived through 6 days that should have ended me. Because I'd been given life when death would have been mercy. They evacuated me to a field hospital, then to a hospital in England. Treated me for dehydration, starvation, oxygen deprivation, psychological trauma. I was in the hospital for 3 months. Physically, I recovered. The human body is remarkable. Given food, water, rest, it can recover from almost anything. By February 1918, I was physically healthy, medically cleared, ready to return to duty. But mentally, I was destroyed, shattered, broken in ways that would never heal. I couldn't sleep without seeing the darkness, without feeling the walls closing in, without smelling the decay. Couldn't be in enclosed spaces, couldn't be in darkness, couldn't be alone. The army called it shell shock, said it was normal, said lots of soldiers had it, said I'd get over it with time. They were wrong. You don't get over 6 days buried alive with dead men. You just learn to carry it, learn to function despite it, learn to pretend you're normal when you're not. They sent me back to France in March 1918, back to the trenches, back to the war, back to the place that had buried me alive. I served until the armistice, November 11th, 1918. Survived until the end. Got my discharge, went home to Manchester, a veteran, a survivor, a man who'd been buried alive and lived to tell about it. I tried to build a normal life after the war. Used my discharge pay to rent a small flat. Found work, not in the mills. Couldn't go back to enclosed spaces. Found outdoor work, construction, road building, anything that kept me outside, under the sky, in light. I couldn't do enclosed spaces, couldn't do basements, couldn't do underground. Even walking through a tunnel would trigger panic attacks, would send me back to the dugout, back to the darkness, back to 6 days with corpses. I couldn't sleep in the dark. Needed light, always. A lamp, a candle, something. Even dim light was better than complete darkness, because complete darkness meant burial, meant being trapped, meant death. People thought I was strange, eccentric, the veteran who couldn't sleep with the lights off, who wouldn't go into basements, who panicked in elevators, who had to sit near exits, always, who couldn't relax unless he could see the sky. They were right. I was strange. War had made me strange, had broken something fundamental, had turned me into something that couldn't quite function in normal society. I never married, never had a family. How could I? How could I let someone get close when I was this broken? When I woke up screaming every night? When I couldn't do normal things? When I was haunted by 3 men who died in darkness? I lived alone, worked, existed. That was all. No real life, no real connections, just survival, just breathing, just getting through each day until the next. The nightmares never stopped. Every night I was back in the dugout, back in the darkness. Sometimes I was Wilson, dying on day 2. Sometimes Hayes, suffocating on day 3. Sometimes Bennett, fading on day 4. Sometimes myself, alone on days 5 and 6. Always the darkness, always the smell, always the certainty of death. I'd wake up gasping, clawing at the walls, convinced I was buried, convinced the room was collapsing. Would take minutes to remember where I was, to understand I was safe, to believe I wasn't still underground. And even then, I never fully believed it, never fully escaped. Part of me stayed in that dugout, stayed buried, stayed dying forever. I went back to France in 1927, 9 years after the war ended. Needed to see it, needed to understand, needed to face it. Passchendaele was unrecognizable. The mud was gone, grass growing, memorials being built. The battlefield was becoming a cemetery, neat rows of white crosses, thousands of them, tens of thousands, all the men who died in that mud. I found the section where our trench had been, where the dugout had collapsed. It was just a field now, peaceful, quiet. No sign of the horror that had happened there. I stood where I thought the dugout had been, 20 feet below my feet. That small space, that tomb, where 3 men had died and I'd somehow survived. "I'm sorry," I said, speaking to Wilson, to Hayes, to Bennett. "I'm sorry I survived when you didn't. I'm sorry I got 6 days when you got 2, 3, 4. I'm sorry I made it out and you didn't." The words felt inadequate, meaningless, but I had to say them, had to acknowledge, had to admit that I'd survived and they hadn't, and I didn't understand why. I never found their graves. They were likely buried nearby, in one of the cemeteries, one of the thousands of white crosses, but I didn't find them, didn't get to say goodbye properly, didn't get closure, not that closure was possible. You don't get closure on being buried alive with dead men. You just carry it forever. I left France that same day, never went back, couldn't face it again, couldn't stand on that ground knowing what was beneath, knowing what had happened, knowing that I should be buried there too, but somehow wasn't. The survivor's guilt never faded, never diminished. Why them and not me? Why did Wilson die first Why did Hayes die next? Why Bennett before me? Was it random? Was it my body being stronger? Was it God choosing? Was it meaningless chance? I've spent over a century trying to answer that question, trying to understand, trying to find meaning in why I survived 6 days when they didn't. And I have no answer, no understanding, no meaning. Just the knowledge that I breathed when they stopped breathing, that I lived when they died, that I got out and they didn't, and that randomness haunts me more than any nightmare.
The medical explanation, when I finally sought it in the 1950s, was simple: metabolism. My body, for whatever reason, genetics, conditioning, luck, consumed oxygen slower than theirs, produced less carbon dioxide, survived longer on less air. That's all. That's why I lived and they died. Not courage, not strength, not divine favor, just biology. Just the random luck of having a metabolism that functioned slightly better in low oxygen environments. Wilson died first because he panicked, used oxygen faster. Hayes died next because he was larger, needed more air. Bennett lasted longer because he was calm, disciplined, but still died before me. And I survived because my body happened to be the most efficient, because random genetics gave me a slight advantage that meant everything in that specific situation. It's not fair. It's not just. It's not meaningful. It's just biology, just chance. Just the universe showing you that survival is random and meaningless and has nothing to do with deserving. But knowing the explanation doesn't make it easier, doesn't lift the guilt, doesn't change the fact that I'm alive and they're not, doesn't make the nightmares stop, doesn't make me feel less like I stole their lives by surviving. The psychiatrists, when I finally saw them in the 1960s, said I had survivor's guilt, PTSD, complex trauma from prolonged life-threatening situation combined with isolation and sensory deprivation. Said it was normal. Said lots of war veterans experienced it. Said I should have sought help decades ago. They were right. But help doesn't fix being buried alive, doesn't erase the memories, doesn't give you back what war took. It just helps you manage, helps you cope, helps you survive despite the weight. I spent decades in therapy, tried every treatment, every medication, every approach. Some helped, some didn't. All of them together allowed me to function, allowed me to seem normal, allowed me to get through days without completely falling apart. But none of them freed me. None of them let me escape the dugout. None of them ended the nightmares. I still can't sleep in complete darkness. I'm 107 years old, and I still need a light on to sleep. Still panic in enclosed spaces. Still avoid basements. Still need to see the sky. Still carry 6 days from over a century ago.
I'm writing this now because I'm dying. The doctors say weeks, maybe days. My body is failing. 107 years is a long time, longer than most. Longer than I ever expected after Passchendaele. Certainly longer than Wilson, Hayes, and Bennett got. And as the end approaches, I find myself thinking about that dugout, about those 6 days, about the darkness. But I'm not afraid. Haven't been afraid of death since 1917, since I spent 6 days waiting for it, since I learned what dying feels like. Death doesn't scare me. Darkness doesn't scare me. Being buried doesn't scare me. What scares me is facing them, Wilson, Hayes, and Bennett. What do I say? How do I explain why I survived and they didn't? How do I justify breathing when they stopped? How do I look them in the eye and admit that I lived 107 years while they got 19, 21, and 25? There's no justification, no explanation that makes it right. Just the truth. I survived. You didn't. I don't know why. I never knew why. And I spent a century carrying that guilt. That's all I have. That's all I can offer. I spent 6 days trapped underground with you. Spent 6 days breathing the same air. Spent 6 days waiting to join you. And then I didn't. I survived. I got out. I lived. And you didn't. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for surviving, for living, for having a century you never got, for everything. I hope wherever you are, you understand. Understand that survival wasn't my choice, wasn't something I wanted, wasn't a victory, just biology, just chance, just meaningless randomness. I hope you forgive me, though I know I don't deserve forgiveness, don't deserve anything except what you got: darkness, suffocation, death. But I got life instead, and I've spent every day of it wishing I could trade places, wishing you'd survived and I hadn't, wishing the biology had been different, the randomness had gone another way, the 6 days had ended differently. They're going to bury me soon, when I die, going to put me in the ground, in a coffin, in darkness. Everything I've feared for a century, everything I've avoided, everything that takes me back to the dugout. But I'm ready, ready to be in darkness again, ready to be buried, ready to face what I've been running from for over 100 years. Maybe in death I'll finally find Wilson, Hayes, and Bennett, finally get to explain, finally get to apologize properly, finally get to ask the question I carried for a century: do you forgive me for surviving? Maybe they'll understand. Maybe they'll say it wasn't my fault, that survival isn't something to apologize for, that they're glad I made it out. Or maybe they'll be angry, resentful, bitter that I got a century and they got days, that I experienced life and love and everything while they rotted in French mud. I don't know, won't know until I face them. But I'm ready, ready for judgment, ready for accountability, ready to finally, after a century, answer for surviving. This is my confession. I spent 6 days trapped underground with the fallen, 6 days in darkness with dead men, 6 days that should have ended me, but didn't. And I survived when 3 others didn't for no reason except random biology. No meaning, no purpose, no justice, just chance. And I've carried that for 107 years, carried the weight of being alive when they're not, carried the guilt of survival, carried the knowledge that my life came at the cost of theirs. Not directly, not intentionally, but still. I breathed because they stopped breathing. I survived because they died. I got a century because they got days. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. To Wilson, to Hayes, to Bennett, to everyone who didn't make it out, to everyone who died in darkness while I somehow lived. I'm sorry I survived. I'm sorry I got more time. I'm sorry for everything.